the real solutions to material poverty need to include economic drivers, economic inclusion, economic mobility, those things.
Yep.
And that adds sustainability. So we think about it fairly holistically, but I think in how it hits our mission statement or our core values has really to do with that first thing. It's sort of, we are positioning ourselves intentionally to bring development as opposed to more relief.
Welcome to Place Matters, a podcast about the intersection of race, place, and poverty. We will explore the belief that the path towards ending inequity and promoting prosperity is through the work of holistic neighborhood development. The content for this podcast is based on over 45 years of experience, expertise, failure, and hope from our organization, Focused Community Strategies, better known as FCS. This is the Foundations series, where we will talk about the big ideas and core frameworks that make FCS, well, FCS. I am Sean Duncan, the Director of Training and Consulting for FCS and the host for Place Matters. For the last 15 years, people from all over the U.S. and folks from a number of countries have made their way to the neighborhood of historic South Atlanta to visit us here at FCS. They come as pilgrims in search of a better way to make a difference in their communities. And we spend time carefully walking them through our neighborhood and through our work that we are doing to promote flourishing in this place. And it's not uncommon for people to see something we are doing here that they want to replicate in their own community. And as honored as we are by this, we frequently talk people out of it. You might be wondering why. Well, it's not because we don't stand by what we do, but because we are convinced that it's our why that deserves replication, not just our what. In this episode, and in the one that follows, we're going to talk about just that, the mission and the core values that allow FCS to have the impact that we do. Joining me today to talk about mission and core values is Jim Weiner, President of FCS, and Marvin Nesbitt, FCS's Senior Director of Community Development. So we're going to dig in on talking about the kind of core mission statement of FCS as well as one of our core values. So we'll start with that mission statement. So for those that might be unfamiliar, focused community strategies partners with under-resourced neighborhoods to provide innovative and holistic development that produces flourishing communities and God's shalom. So I want to take a minute to ask a couple questions around some of the key phrases that show up in this mission statement. So first, talk to me about the importance of the phrase partners with that shows up in the mission statement.
Well, I think that partners with has to do with how we enter a community, right? The posture with which we come in and the way we learn about who lives there. It's how we begin, right? So often when FCS gets asked to do something, we don't think about necessarily us solving or doing it first. We're often thinking about how do we do this through partnership. I think the other thing is, we have the word holistic, and when we begin talking about our work as holistic, the work of community development in neighborhood with legacy neighbors, that holistic piece goes wide and deep, and it would be silly to think that one organization could do alone. And so we just sort of come in knowing and understanding that partnership's really critical to what we do. And partnership is a skill. It takes maturity to be a really good partner. And we talk about partnering, pushing the mission forward of both partners or all partners. If it pushes FCS's mission forward, but not the neighborhood's mission, that's a bad partnership. So we try to be mature and thoughtful in how we think about neighborhood and working together. And there's got to be deference applied, and that takes maturity. And it's also fun. Working with others and learning from others, and it just adds to the life of the process.
So I'm hearing like this language of partnering is carrying two distinct things around where this is a partnership with the residents of the neighborhood, as a partnership with the neighborhood itself, as well as because of the comprehensive nature of the work, we've also got to partner with other institutions or entities because the work is too expansive in scope for us to maybe handle that on its own. So what about the word innovative that shows up in this phrase? I think we live in a entrepreneurship heavy culture, and there's no shortage of incubators and startups that we like that kind of narrative of the innovator that comes up with this great new idea and becomes the overnight sensation. But for us, I don't think we're just kind of grabbing a hold of like culturally relevant language. I think innovatives may be doing something different for us. So this showing up in the mission statement as doing innovative development, why is that a qualifier we find necessary?
Yeah, great question, Sean. It's oftentimes when you're working in under-resourced communities, you are looking at communities where there are a number of challenges and issues that the community residents are faced with, right? And for so long in our efforts to eliminate those issues and challenges, we've always tried to lay the same plan over the top of everyone in the neighborhood as if they're not unique individuals. Right?
Okay.
And so when you think about that and also add in the factor of shrinking resources, affordability when it comes to housing, other issues in terms of a lot of the impacts of situations like COVID that may have led to increased barriers in households, right? It requires us to challenge ourselves to think differently about how we help build capacity in under-resourced neighborhoods and help them with addressing the issues and being able to respond to the issues and challenges that they may face in their neighborhoods. And so we always want to challenge ourselves to think innovatively about how we help build capacity to really respond to the various needs and issues that we are set out as an organization to help eliminate.
I think one of the things I would add to that is the idea of innovation in our mission statement describes an ethos. So we can go back to our founder, right? So Bob was highly entrepreneurial, and that meant he was really good at problem solving and creative at how he came to solutions in a good way.
Yeah.
And because of that, we tend to be that way as an ethos. So if I were to tell our team, hey, we're going to do this project and this is what you guys are going to do, our team would rebel. They just would, because we are so used to being thoughtful and creative and looking outside of barriers. We're looking at systems within neighborhood and we see how they don't work. We tend to be a group that pushes against some of the things that we see are inequitable, and our team is not settled with the status quo. So innovative, for me, describes the idea that we want to be creative in how we come about solutions. We want to be inclusive. All ways that systems are not. Right? So innovative for us sort of gives us the freedom to be who we are, and it gives us great stories. So we just have, in 45 years of working together as a team, we have all these great stories of innovations we tried that failed, and sometimes you learn most from those, and you backtrack and go again, and then that would lead to like innovation for us. Like I think there's this underlying philosophy that we all know: program is not forever. So when we have this conversation coming from the faith-based world that when we develop a program and we go to the Holy Scriptures to connect to its value, and you have this eternal, right? This this sort of centuries old history document, and what it does is the program does the same thing. Because we quoted a scripture or whatever, the program becomes eternal.
You have to change the program as to somehow be a sentiment against the founding scripture or whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but we don't think that way. We think often programs solve or work for solutions for a period of time.
Yeah. But
it's not static either. You're constantly moving. I would say sometimes this is one of the things that wears our team out, is that we're constantly innovating. So we're sort of not always happy. I don't know of a time where our team reaches the place where, we're really happy with
There's
that.
Another way. There's another step. There's another way to improve things. Yeah.
I mean, you just think about who's on the team. Like the three of us sitting here, immediately I could name a half dozen of us that is just like, we're always wanting to push. And when we put that with partnership, that when we're doing that with in partnership with community, right? Innovating with community.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think innovation fits in there because it's who we are, but it's also what's required. That the neighborhood that we're in isn't going to be the same in 10 years.
Yeah.
And if you don't innovate, you've got the same things just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
Doing what they did,
in
years 3, 4, and 5, but in years 6, 7, 8 began to lose productivity because the neighborhood has changed. And so anyway, innovation is important.
And what we're advocating for, if you choose neighborhood or place as your organizing principle, right? Not a social issue in particular or a certain population, but when you choose place as your kind of core lens, like whether it's your personality or not, you're going to have to be innovative. You're going to have to take risks. You're going to have to fail. You're going to have to enter into territory that no one else has entered into and solved yet, right? If the solutions were clear, we would say, well, we're not going to be innovative. We don't need to be. But what we're saying is there's a whole lot of problems nobody has yet solved, right? And so you've got to have this willingness to just risk and try, and I think we'll have a later series that really digs into the depths of our housing work, but I don't know if we've ever done the same strategy on housing for more than a few years at a time, right? Because like if your work is working, then the context should be changing, which means you've kind of worked yourself out of your previous strategy. You've got to find kind of that next kind of necessary step in that work.
I think also on that, if I can comment.
Jump in.
Makes me think, but we're in a world that wants to demand efficiency and scale, right? And so when you're working in neighborhood and you're adjusting for that neighborhood, like you're doing that, I think there's a reality to innovation that you want to be using new technology. You want to be using, like around housing, the opportunities we have for funding have completely changed in the last 10 years. Completely.
Yeah.
And so we think about that very differently. At the same time, you want to bring people along, right? So it's just rarely static. And if you want to have impact, you've got to be flexible in how you do that. And let's face it, systems are in place, are highly intractable at times. So, I mean, you're digging deep and creating, while the whole world, like all your board members are telling you, how do we bring this to scale? Like, how do we do this all over the U.S.? And I think, well, you have to innovate in each place. Right. So anyway, that demand for scale actually, I think, can stifle creativity, sometimes stifle innovation. What you need to do is hit impact where you are. If place is that driver, right? Like you were saying. So anyway.
And that makes me nervous, I think, sometimes when people, and we host a lot of groups to come and see, and we love that. It's probably one of my favorite things to do as far from the training consulting side, is just to have people on the ground in the neighborhood, three-dimensional, you're immersed in the context, you see it all. And there's always a sense of like, I know you see what we've built, but please don't just replicate the building of. Like, I want you to think about this process of innovation and creativity, this intimacy with the neighborhood that led to this end result, right? And like what we would rather you replicate is that spirit of intimacy with the neighborhood that leads to innovation, right? That's the thing we want to see replicated as people move forward. Marvin, with your kind of fresh eyes on FCS, I'm curious with this word innovative, maybe you need to step in and be like, you guys really aren't all that innovative. Like,
Exactly.
I've seen this everywhere. So how would you respond to that? Just with you're probably seeing things that Jim and I don't even notice anymore. So I'm curious about how do you see innovation at play within FCS?
Well, yeah, one of the beauties of being at FCS, Sean, is that you feel it, right? It's baked into the culture here of the organization, and it was one of the things that certainly attracted me after the first couple of weeks being on board. We are challenged to be innovative, and when you are challenged to be innovative, I and others can interpret that, including those that we serve, can interpret that as growth, right? And that is what we are seeking to do in this work that we're doing. Is we're helping those that we work with, this community and others, and including the organizations that we work with outside. We're challenging everyone to be innovative for the purposes of growth. Right? And I think when we are all challenging each other to be innovative in our thought and in how we move and how we show up, right? At the end of the day, we're building everyone's capacity to be better servants and also to be better leaders of our families, better stewards of our resources, and being better to each other. Right? Just at the end of the day, just growth in every aspect of daily living and daily life. So.
Yeah. There's something we'll have to put in the show notes that won't want to go into deeply now, but there's this contrast that's been made about playing a finite game versus an infinite game. And one of the core contrasts is that in infinite games, you just know the rules will always change. And so you're always agile, flexible, adaptable. But what really strikes me is why infinite game is a great metaphor for the way FCS operates, is that we've chosen a cause that is way bigger than us. Like at some level, you could look at this like producing a flourishing community, producing shalom. Like we can't do that, like right as an organization, right? But we're like, and we're not unaware of that fact. But we've chosen something that's far beyond ourselves and will outlive us. Like this won't be accomplished in our lifetime, right? And if you choose something that robust, you can't not choose innovation as just your way of being, because the rules will always change, the context will always change, the mission will always outlive us. And I think that's this to me, and that's what I think is so compelling about FCS. I feel like I'm coming to work in a new organization every couple of months,
right?
And not in Jim, this is a good question I think for you. Is like we're also we don't fly by the seat of our pants as an organization either. So what we wouldn't be communicating is with the flexibility, with the agility, we're just kind of making it up every day. We are a highly strategic organization in the way that we do it. So how, as the leader of all of this, how do we balance like strategy and 5-year plans and spreadsheets and budgets and goals and objectives with this need for flexibility and innovation?
That is a great question. Like when I think, how do we balance? I'm not sure we're always balanced. I feel like the pendulum is always on one side or the other, and you're pulling back. But I would say, I think to how do we balance that need is we on almost everything take the long view. So we don't think this is like our mission and what we're going after we've got a 5-year strategic plan, but that 5-year strategic plan is one step in a decades long work. And so we may get pulled left or right a little bit in terms of, as you know, we're moving from A to B, you may move one direction and then the other, but you're still trying to get to B, which is that infinite game you're talking about. These are big goals, like big things you're going at. And then we struggle, as any nonprofit would. There are moments where we don't have the resources we need, and you are making hard organizational decisions. I mean, Sean, you would say right now you're down a person, You could look at me and say, when do I get that person? And I told you
next question on the list here.
Exactly. And I'm telling you, well, we're not doing any hiring for the first quarter of 2023. We're at the end of the first quarter, and I still haven't opened up that gate, right? And you're not alone in that. We are trying to grow, and yet at this moment, resource constrained from a financial perspective. So like any organization, you're constantly balancing those. And we look at, here's an example. I'm not sure if it fits well in here, so I'll let you make that decision. But when you go to our mission statement, we have the word under-resourced neighborhoods. Right? Well, I've communicated really for the first time publicly what I felt like in our strategic planning process. And we wanted this word changed in our mission statement. So 2022 strategic planning year, or excuse me, 2021, and that strategic plan goes 2022 into 2027. So 2021, we're in the middle of the pandemic. All of our strategic planning went virtual, like everybody. And in those meetings, we decided, you couldn't do an 8-hour retreat, strategic planning retreat.
I love 8-hour Zoom meetings, by the way. Those are my favorite.
Exactly, right? Which we had planned. We had 2 of those retreats planned, and it ended up becoming a series of 60 to 90-minute Zoom calls. And we over and over got stuck on this word in our mission statement. And we got sort of to the end where you're like, we've got to pull the plan together without changing that word. And why would we change that word? Because it's a negative statement about the communities we want to partner with. So
efficient language.
It's like coming to you and say, I want to partner with you, but I hate that shirt. Right? It's like,
listen, it was the only one that I didn't have to
cut your hair differently. We could partner great. So at some point, though, you've got to move forward, and we have this current strategic plan period to continue to think through that. And so it's sort of it's in writing, but it's still living and breathing mission statement. And that word has been in our mission statement for decades, literally. But where we are now is different from 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And we would like to change that word. But we had board members, we had neighbors, we had team members all on this task force, and we went round and round and round about that word. And I have team members I know that were disappointed that we didn't change it. So how do we keep balance? How do we keep sustainable? How do we, well, it's the long view. You keep working and keep going, and you accept some things, and even if they're not perfect, and still try to strike with force.
That's really good. I think about our values-centric way of being as an organization is part of what allows this balance of strategy and innovation to stay in harmony. And I like the pendulum metaphor. I think there are some things that are natural tensions that shouldn't be resolved. There's some tensions that are negative tensions. They're putting strain on a system that we have to resolve. But at some level, there are tensions that are necessary. That's helped. That if you didn't have that tension, you would be so overly committed to a strategy you couldn't do your actual mission. You're just running a plan but missing the mission. Versus you're so innovative, you've got shiny object syndrome. And I think we could probably do a few episodes on there was this stage of FCS's life where we had shiny object syndrome. We were doing so much innovation, it was like we're mission drifting here, and we've got to start doing some trimming to get more strategic. So I think that value centered way is that it's that what I've appreciated about FCS is that even though we believe we have expertise, we have thought leadership, we have skill, we've done things others haven't been able to, there is a pretty healthy self-critique that goes on, that we're even willing to question our own mission statement. We're even willing to say, oh, we've done a lot of things really poorly, and here's where we've missed the mark. And I think that kind of not drinking of the Kool-Aid type of thing, but always saying is the neighborhood flourishing? Is the neighborhood flourishing? And that's always kind of the North Star. And everything else we're willing to change, right? As it fits or doesn't, kind of throughout that kind of work. I appreciate that honesty. That's a good reflection on how even at a mission statement level, we have I've heard people call it a holy discontent, right? It's not just critical or frustrated or upset, but saying like, there's always a way to be honest about what better can happen.
Here's what's funny about that. So we had an open house a couple weeks back, and we discussed at the open house with our guests, right, the mission statement, and we were discussing this issue. And afterwards, one of the people at the open house comes walking over to me. I was sitting in the back of the room, comes walking over to me and said, "Did you ever think about this word?" And I just had to laugh. I was just like, gosh, we talked for hours on this word and never used that term. And it was just like, wah, 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 you know, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how many conversations, but we are all passionate about this work. And so when you get 9 or 10 passionate people, it's hard to have full-hearted agreement on everything anyway. And it's funny, you know, you mentioned being values driven. I would say we know one of the struggles that we have right now is there are some underlying values that we are trying to sort of dig up to say, okay, these are actually underlying values, but we don't have them named. Like I get asked, who works at an FCS? Like who works? And I'll often say, well, the team that works here, most of them have somehow, they've been involved in our systems, and they have some sort of discontent with the systems, and they have opted out of maybe, what would I say, your sort of for-profit world, or they've opted into, I want to be about solutions to changing system, which makes us as a team. I mean, we can really grind on issues. We can be really passionate. But the other thing is, and Deshaun, I feel like your voice in this has been, there's something going on underneath that is making this happen. We need to talk about what's going on underneath, not just about this is happening again. And I would say that's the innovation skill set that we have, right? It's our drive for development. It's partnering, like it's in there. But anyway, it's just so important and hard for organizations to do. For sure.
Because sustaining as an organization oftentimes requires like getting more control on that. And
I had a really good friend ask me yesterday at lunch, Jim, at what point will you get discontent enough as the president of FCS to make the call? And he's laughing because he's sitting right here. But he says, he says to me, Jim, I'm going to jump out of employee-employer relationship. And as a friend, it just feels like you're waiting. So when are you going to make the call?
Say more, Marvin. Say more.
No.
He's like, that's behind the veil. I can't do that with a microphone.
No, but the point being, this is a really hard team to do that on, right? To just say, we've got a mission. And,
let's go.
And we're going, and this is the way we're going because of who we are from a values standpoint. And the fact that we know we need people around the table to figure out answers to these. And usually when we're grinding, like we can get at odds with each other, know that conflict is a real thing. But the work of solving it, I would say our struggle is, can we all stay at the table long enough? Right? Because we're often, I mean, we're not playing around with small issues. We're talking about race and equity and how we think about it. We're talking about care for one another. Like we talk about know yourself to lead yourself. So how are you being healthy as a leader? Because it takes healthy people and healthy organization to try to create health in community or participate in health in community. All those things. I mean, we're constantly innovating and we're constantly trying to figure out what's the best way forward.
I think it was you that in a conversation we had a while back that used the word unsettled about what it was that led you to join this work. And I was like, that's a word that not you may be the only one that's used it, but I'm like, that's what I've been hearing as I've been kind of leaning into hearing, well, what prompted you to, talking to leaders and staff at FCS, like, how'd you get here? Because we didn't all come out of the same like degree programs
Exactly.
or training or our professions before here aren't ever the same. I'm like, okay, so how did this random bunch of people all end up working together? It's like, because they're all unsettled, right? And at some level, it's like, and I think some of the training that's been most valuable for me has been even naming, okay, that unsettledness is a gift. However, what your personality profile is going to do is ignore the 90% that's been successful and good and just obsess about the 10% that's not happening. I'm like, okay, that's true. I feel a little seen and insulted, but yeah, but so like, but it's a call to me, so how do we as a team, I have to, maybe this is sad, I have to like build into like regular rhythms, like, oh, this is when we're going to celebrate.
Right.
Just because unless it's like put into a structure of a weekly meeting or a monthly gathering or something, I'm just going to be like, what's next? What's like, performance evaluations are miserably hard for me because like what I will naturally want to do is be like, I'm supposed to talk about the good things you've done in the last 4 months. It's like, I can't remember. It's like, I can list for you the 12 things I want you to be working on in the next 4 months, you know?
Exactly.
And so it's so much harder to be like, I gotta slow down. But when I do it, I'm going back, I'm like, holy cow, look how much we've done in the last 4 months. Is that even possible? And so creating, again, that's like with the balance of strategy and innovation of this battle, the balance between unsettled and a healthy discontent with like celebration and fun. I think there's a playfulness to the culture here that I think allows, this work's going to be hard, period. So like, don't be miserable while you're doing it. Like, let's have fun along the way.
It's fun. Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead. I was just agreeing with Sean. It's, this is, it can wear on you, right? And so you need some way of, again, one of those other things that I appreciate about the organization is that there are so many ways in which to rejuvenate yourself that's kind of built into the regular 9 to 5 here in the organization.
He hasn't even played Farkle yet.
Come on, is he really on the team yet? He's like, what does that word even mean? This is so weird.
It's like my second week here, and they pulling out the ping pong table, and I'm like, this is what we do here, right?
And I think we beat you.
Let's be honest. David Park, member of our team, beats all of us.
All of us,
shamefully so.
So
the game is how many points can we get off David?
I just don't want to lose with 0 points. I want to score one. I'm like,
exactly.
I got one.
But yeah, I mean, it's the first time I've ever been in an organization where, that type of attention to the inner strength of its staff is really been a priority for the organization at that level. So it's really exciting to see, because what happens is we all now have the energy necessary to walk outside that door and face the big challenge that you talked about earlier that we are taking on. I mean, it's very ambitious work. And again, trying to chop down the huge oak tree, it wears you out. So it's necessary.
Yeah. And that culture of just self-care, of play, of just caring well for each other. I think, self-care is now like an industry word. Like there's now lots of books and conferences. It's now like a commodity that we promote. And I think there are companies that have a commitment to that out of just being smarter about their bottom line. If people are burned out, stressed out, mentally unwell, they're not going to produce, right? I would say my experience of kind of the care that FCS is creating is actually, no, we legitimately care about you as a human being. This isn't just, hey, do self-care so that you can produce the widgets we need you to produce. But like we care that you're a healthy person, full stop. And the way that I've seen you guys as leaders and other leaders on our teams lean into people to tell them to stop working, right? To chill out, to back off, take care of yourself. And just this commitment to say that we've chosen to not look away from the hardest things in our world. And gazing at those things and working on those things can, as you said, it can be exhausting, right? It can wear on you. And we're saying like, not just so that you keep producing for us, but that so that you're healthy and you find joy in this. We're going to promote that. So I love that as a commitment here as well. So this word of development. So the organization has 3 core values. There's a ton of things that we do. There's a ton of work that we do, but we've kind of claimed that there are 3 core values that are supposed to drive everything we do: neighboring, dignity, and development. In a separate episode, we're going to dig in on the neighboring and dignity core value words. But in this one, I want us to talk a bit about development as a core value word. Now, development makes sense as a practice word for FCS. We're building and creating things. We're in neighborhoods, and there's lots of dirt being moved and bricks going up, and a lot of things happening. But what does it mean that development's a value word for us, not just a practice word?
I think when I think of development, so in preparation, thinking about this, there's sort of 3 ways that we use develop the word internally. Yep. We talk of development as opposed to relief.
Okay.
So a type of help that we would give in the U.S., right, to when we're thinking about material or generational poverty. One-way solutions, emergency solutions, which are good, right, relief.
Yeah.
But when you're thinking about chronic need or the generational reality of poverty, relief doesn't come close to solving. In fact, we think it actually, that process of one-way giving, it stunts relationships. It is almost always paternalistic. It solves top-down, which is needed in an emergency. It's 100% needed. So we're not anti-relief. We just have tried to position FCS, because there are all sorts of organizations out there that work in that sort of traditional relief mode. But in terms of what is unique to FCS, we think about development. How can we build economic, social, structural capacity in place so that sustainability goes up, so that flourishing goes up for everyone in place. So there's that way that we think about the word development. It's sort of juxtaposition to this industry way of saying we're solving.
Yeah, the game that we're in is long-term change to chronic realities and not short-term. People are hurting, let's help. People are hurting, let's help. And both are valid, but we're saying as a value, what we mean is we're in for the long-term measurable change.
Yeah. So then I was thinking we get caught because we do real estate development. Sometimes we get talking about, which you mentioned sort of at the start there, development as a real estate term or a built environment.
Right.
And I would say we are thoughtful about built environment, because built environment is part of that structural indicator of the health of a neighborhood. And often we're talking about neighborhoods that have really suffered under disinvestment and therefore deal with blight and deal with things that from a built environment bring unhealth to everybody, not just those in the community, but even those around or traveling through. So there's development as built environment. And then finally, I would say development as sustainability, which we've talked about a little bit. But we think the real solutions to material poverty need to include economic drivers, economic inclusion, economic mobility, those things. And that adds sustainability. So we think about it fairly holistically, but I think in how it hits our mission statement or our core values has really to do with that first thing. It's sort of, we are positioning ourselves intentionally to bring development as opposed to more relief solutions, which there are plenty of.
Yeah. And I think in general, like we've observed, there's at the broad spectrum of how to respond to the social challenges of our day, there's tends to be a lot of folks in the relief category, and there's a good number of people in the advocacy category to say, hey, at a national, federal, state, citywide level, policies have just got to change that are harming people. And we say yes to both ends of that. But in general, I think we've observed there's not enough people in that development lane, as to say who's going to get in on the ground with places and people and just do the step-by-step change of how these places can become truly equitable. Wealth can be built, community can be created, safety can be felt, opportunity can be had. All those things that begin to happen at neighborhood level. It's like, yeah, we need to give relief when crises are happening. Yes, we got to advocate so there's structural systemic change more broadly. But in the midst of both of those, we need more people to say, we're going to do that. That's a middle ground. It's probably the wrong way to say that, but we're going to get in that space of doing the day-to-day development change. That's good.
And Sean, let me just add to that. If you think about it this way, in terms of what people celebrate, right? Or what satisfies. Right. In the relief lane, I walk up and I receive the relief.
Yeah.
How do I feel after it? Right.
Oh,
there may
great.
be a temporary satisfaction, right? That you may have. But then when you walk away and spend a few moments thinking about that relief, you still have an issue that has went unresolved. And chances are I'm going to be back for that same relief, right? And I'm gonna have that same feeling. But if you're focused on development as a core value, you increase the chances of eliminating or building the infrastructure necessary to eliminate whatever that issue is that led to the need for the relief. And eliminating it for the long term, right? We're changing it for generations. And I think that is where, as an organization, that is where we want to be headed, right? How are we changing these systems and building systems that can withstand the test of time and change the trajectory for the individuals and the communities that we serve for a long period of time.
So development is, we as a value, it means we expect and we drive for change, right? That we don't want it just to be better, we want it changed. And it's this word, like if you make development a value, you're always gonna be asking why.
Right.
That need we keep responding to, that hurt we keep trying to put salve on, like why does that exist? What's going on? And what can we be doing structurally that sustains, change over a long period of time? But development, there are lots of different industries or associations or loose networks of people that will use development as a term as well. You've got asset-based community development. There's the CCDA, or Christian Community Development Association, that we've been a part since the very beginning, as well as public and private ways of using this word. Most city governments have an economic development person, et cetera. And I would imagine FCS overlaps kind of the Venn diagram of circles that overlap with these various ways. But what would we say is unique in our use of that word than maybe ways that it gets used in other contexts?
That's a really good question. Because the truth is we spend a lot of time, like you say, the Venn diagram or Venn diagram of all these different ways development use, which we have a foot in all of those, or a hand, or conversation,
an ear,
at least. something. So that's a really good question, is what's unique. And I don't have an answer. No. I feel like, I've got to think through that for a minute. What's unique to us? So I certainly would say place is unique in that we're embedded deeply. Like you may have talked in other podcasts, but a significant portion of our staff live where we work intentionally, right? That proximity piece. So there's that. It also, we can be using that term development on a individual scale. Could be somebody in our Start Me Accelerator, or somebody in one of our houses, our rental, or in our home ownership program. So it could be sort of personal level, but then we can sort of pull up all the way to sort of the whole neighborhood level to think, how would healthy development help in this place or in this piece of our neighborhood? So I don't know if that's sort of what you're going with or thinking about on that, but that's where my head goes.
Yeah.
And if I can add something, you want to just this notion of uniqueness around development is we're not afraid to be very intentional about pulling the residents of the community in that development process.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Into
Yeah,
that
that's true.
process.
Yeah.
Right. So we're very intentional about that because we recognize the value add that comes directly from each individual household, and the importance of actually developing solutions that work for not just at the individual level, but at the systems level.
Yeah.
Right? And we value that.
Yeah.
Right. So I certainly believe in terms of, uniqueness around the development. That's one of the things that sets this organization apart from many others.
Yeah. I mean, there's this, it's place-based, but it's also people-centered, and it's also like systems-oriented. We want to see system-wide change through all of this. And I think about like, there are those that maybe use the word of development and community development as a way of saying we're going to stand in solidarity with those who society has marginalized, right? And we would say, yes, we need that proximity, we need that solidarity. And then there's others who are recognizing the massive systems like housing, et cetera, that need to change. And so they're doing multi-million-dollar massive development projects to make sure we have more equitable communities. So yes, we're doing that too, and we love that too. But there's something about like, when we're talking about development, we're saying yes to all of it. We got to walk in solidarity. We got to live in proximity, and we got to do really big, massive system changes, right? And doing those system changes outside of proximity is you're still doing onto a neighborhood, at a neighborhood, for a neighborhood, and not with them. And for us, that's not development in the full, robust nature that we would want it to be. Like those are wonderful development projects, but and we do development projects, but that doesn't represent our value of development, which is going to be at a deeper, kind of more intimate level.
Could I give a quick example?
No, please.
So we celebrated a grand opening of 84-unit multifamily apartment complex that we've built in partnership with a for-profit developer who they did the heavy lifting on that. I give them credit for that. We had a great celebration. Neighbors were out. We had representatives from the city. The mayor was there. The head of our Atlanta's Development Authority. At the state level, we had one of our commissioners of the DCA. And it was a great celebration. And then I had a friend who knows me that she leads another housing nonprofit in Atlanta, and she comes up to me. So we had gone through the whole sort of run of show.
Yeah.
And so now everybody's standing. We had one of our local vendors doing Italian ice, and so people are getting an Italian ice, and we're all standing around talking. It was really a celebratory moment. And anyway, she comes over to me and she says, "Hey, Jim, you can smile." And I was caught. I was like, "What?" And she said, "You should really be celebrating this moment." And I was completely stuck because I was thinking there's 3 families from the neighborhood that didn't get in.
Oh, man, yeah.
And I'm telling you, I was standing thinking about, we missed it. Like, which we didn't.
Yeah.
Like, there's reasons.
Yeah.
But that piece of this is, we were talking a little bit about it earlier, but that the importance of neighbor getting in, which is a huge value. I just realized in that moment, like I walked away after talking with her. She's really a sweet friend, and I appreciate it. I needed the call up to
take the win. Take the win.
Take the win, celebrate it, because I was sort of stuck in my own head about I know some neighbors that can't, even with all this good work. We're talking multi-million-dollar development designed to have a mix of incomes, and even with all that work, there's folks that still can't get in. And so in my head, I was thinking, how are we solving for that? This is great, but this whole imposter syndrome of this is really great, but we missed the mark in some areas. And that's the sort of difference of an FCS when you're talking about we're bringing neighbors in and we actually really care. And we have a neighbor that has called us out about that, about, you did this, but there's neighbors, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we live into that tension. And so when we talk about development, it takes real dollars, it takes real discipline, it takes real corporate business work to get units built.
Yeah.
But those units are actually homes for humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And neighbors.
Yeah.
And so how are you bringing that? I would say that's unique to FCS.
Or like our neighborhood engagement coordinator or director would say, we don't want to build an apartment complex, but an apartment community. And that's not just semantics for us. Like, we are not just building roofs for heads. Like, human beings are not just receptacles for need, right? That there's a deeper work that we're doing here. And so we want to build homes, not just houses, right? Or housing, and I think that's I think that level of self-honesty and like, one of the things I've noticed about FCS is they're not very defensive about themselves. Even when at times where I'm like, come on, we should just be like punching back right now because I carry it so deeply. It's like, I can't believe this that someone would say this about, it's like, but to have that critique come and say, yeah, I feel the pain of it too, and I carry it, and let's keep working together to solve for that. I think that's this non-need to practice self-preservation as we talk about. So there's a couple of categories or pillars of our work at FCS where we're doing development by the industry type word, where we're doing housing development, or we're doing economic development. So talk about how our value of development shapes the way we go about housing and the way we go about economics.
Another great question.
I have a few.
He's good at that.
Yeah, he is.
Man, we should hire him.
Is that the chat?
Thanks. I'll turn in my resume. Here it comes over that way.
Is that the chat GBT?
Yeah, we can just plug it in there and see if AI can solve that for us.
Yeah, the again, it really piggybacks off the conversation that we just had, right? When we think about development, we see it as this continual building process, right? For how we resolve issues and eliminate barriers and build capacity, right? And also, importantly, which is, how do we get all of the systems to work together for the benefit of the larger community, for the benefit of those who have been excluded from the various systems. Right? It is that lens in which we look at development that continues that drive for us, that gives us that energy. It sets the marching orders for the organization to continue to work, right? To continue to chop down the big tree, right? And so
we don't want to chop down trees.
We don't want to chop down trees.
Trees are good.
Okay, trees are good.
We need an environmental study before we do that.
So I need to come up with another. But anyway, it gives us the energy to take on the ambitious task, right? Of creating generational change that lasts for forever, and that those that have been excluded can look back on it and really appreciate at some point and tell the stories of how this work, this development work, has actually led to generations of success in their families, right? In their households. So, Jay, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. I mean, I think like when I listen to our housing team as they strategize and think about their housing development work, or listen to our economic development teams, they're thinking about what they're starting or what they're currently working on that they're improving or changing. There's always the lens of, how does this build a healthier neighborhood? It isn't just, we need more affordable units. And I know that's a massive thing. It's a true thing. It's citywide, it's nationwide. But our lens is not just how do we get more units built. It's like, how do we create a healthier neighborhood? And so that's always the driving lens for those pieces first, whether business or housing. I think to me, that's this fascinating nature of like, and that's a instinctive lens. It's not even like we have to, we forgot to ask that question. It is the heartbeat, right, that drives it. So one final question. So development as a word implies we're going from one thing to another. So what is the goal for us? If we've got this value of development, we're a community development organization. What's the goal? Where are we headed with this?
We are trying to name that, actually, to get better at naming that, because you can sort of live that way, going to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
I think if we're going sort of gaining altitude, we would say racial equity is a goal, because when we look at a neighborhood like the one we're embedded in right now, you would say, Sean, that it works exactly how it's designed to work, meaning it's full of, our systems are full of inequities that create a neighborhood that works this way. And so there's a reality that we are interested in a neighborhood where there's greater racial equity, where everybody has opportunity for economic mobility, right? There's an economic piece in there. And though it's sometimes hard to define, that we would say where everybody has opportunity to flourish, right? And you can't have flourishing without those two other things. So where are we going? We used to have a narrative of one neighborhood at a time, and we would say, we'll be in the neighborhood until the neighborhood tells us they can take it from here. And we're less sure about that narrative. 30, 40 years into doing business or doing what we do, the getting to that point, like if the neighborhood gave us a straight arm, that would be meaningful to us. Like we can take it from here. But also, if you're innovating and evolving and changing, you're dialing in and going deeper, and so it's a hard one to answer. What's the next thing? What I would say. So for us at the high level, we're interested in a neighborhood that is flourishing. So it's continuing to grow in racial equity. It's continuing to grow in its ability to provide opportunity for economic mobility. So that means your education systems, your retail systems, bank, pharmacy, grocery, your systems work for everybody there. Anyway, that's off the top
That's
of my
why
head.
that word holistic carries so much weight, is we're not playing. We do care about the whole thing. So, well, thanks for joining this conversation, but more importantly, thanks for being brothers in the unsettled way of life in this work together at FCS.
Absolutely. Let me say thanks to you and your team for doing this. And it's really fun to have on our team a group that is skilled and thoughtful, not just at building houses, which we have, or providing jobs, like creating businesses that provide jobs, which we have, right? Or engaging neighbor in a really effective way, which we have, but we have your team, which enables us to do things like this in a very creative way and forces us to think about how do we talk about what we do. And I just want to say thank you to you. And I know you've got, David and Becca were in here earlier, and Stephen and Stacy and Candace are all making us better as an organization. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Thank you. It's an honor. Place Matters is produced by Focused Community Strategies, whose mission is to partner with under-resourced neighborhoods to provide innovative and holistic development that produces flourishing communities and God's shalom. Place Matters is hosted by FCS's training and consulting team, known as the Lupton Center. If you would like to inquire about our training and consulting services, please reach out to us via our website or find us on LinkedIn and social media. This information can be found in the show notes. If you would like to watch these episodes, the videos can be found on our YouTube channel. And if you like these episodes, please share them on social media. Your support means a lot to us. This show was edited by Tim Rhodes with music by Eric North. Special thanks to David Park and Becca Malpass at FCS for their work in organizing and recording these sessions. We'd also like to say thank you to our partner, Lilly Endowment, whose Thriving Congregations grant has made this podcast possible.